Okay, hi everybody. Let's get going. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us again for our fourth ICANN readout. I'm Susanna Gray. I'm the president of the San Francisco Bay Area Internet Society chapter, and I'm here with my colleague. Okay, hi everybody. Chapter vice president. Let's get going. We're honored to be joined again by our friends over at ICANN, Chris Mondini, vice president, Stakeholder Engagement North America, and Joe Catapano, Stakeholder Engagement Manager, North America. So Chris and Joe are just going to give us an overview of what happened at the latest ICANN meeting. But first I'm going to hand over to Fatima, who will give a quick introduction about the San Francisco Bay Area ISOC chapter. And just a quick note, this session is being recorded. So Fatima, over to you. Fatima? I can't hear you.
Hi, Susanna. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Sorry for flagging that. I was speaking on mute. Anyways, hi, everyone. My name is Fatima, and I'm the vice president for the San Francisco Bay Area chapter of the Internet Society. For folks joining us for the first time, I'm going to kick off this webinar with a really quick introduction to ISOC and our chapter. So the Internet Society is a 25-year-old nonprofit based out of Reston, Virginia, and Geneva, Switzerland. We support and promote the development of the Internet as a global technical infrastructure and a force for good in society. Our mission, as you can see on the right of the slide, is that the Internet is for everyone. And we really collaborate with anyone or any organization that shares this vision of an open, bottom-up, inclusive Internet. A few quick stats. We're more than 100,000 individual members strong globally. This includes contributors from all spheres: technical, government, academia, nonprofit, civil society. We have about 112 chapters across 6 continents, and not mentioned here, but we also have special interest groups focused on specific topics like blockchain, IoT, etc. Our chapters provide us with unique local and regional perspectives on emerging Internet issues. And the San Francisco chapter specifically is run autonomously as a registered 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we go back 9 years. Over this period, we've grown to 900 individual members. All the chapter-related work is run by a team of 6 volunteer board of directors. I'm a part of the board, and Susanna, who's on the call, is on the board as president as well. We're completely funded by sponsorships, donations, and partnerships, and all funds are put back into future programming for the chapter itself. Before I move on to the next slide, I've included a link to the 2019 action plan for the overall ISOC organization. As a chapter, we will be engaging with our local members to see which of these would be most relevant to the San Francisco Bay Area to deep dive further into over the course of next year. If there's an issue from the action plan you're really passionate about, definitely reach out to us and we will find a way to collaborate. Could you go on to the next slide, please? Thank you. A quick overview of our chapter's activities and focus areas. We host educational and networking events for our members about Internet-related issues such as cybersecurity, broadband access, IPv6, net neutrality, and much more. We also fund community ideas through Internet Society's Beyond the Net program for projects that are aligned with the chapter's focus areas, which I'll get into in a bit. And we're an active voice for the end user as part of NORALO, which is ICANN's North American Regional at-large community. Our focus areas include digital inclusion across access, adoption, and meaningful use of the Internet, access for all, which is in close alignment with our mission, increasing representation for women and other underrepresented stakeholders in the information communication technology ecosystem by providing opportunities, Internet governance, cybersecurity, and the Internet of Things. I've included links to join the chapter as a free individual member or as an organizational member. And I will be sending out the slides to all registered participants as well, so you'll have these handy. That's it for me. Any questions before I hand it over to Chris and Joe for the next portion of the webinar? And if not now, I can also be reached via email, which I'll drop in the chat box. Perfect, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Chris Mondini. I'm the Vice President for North America Stakeholder Engagement. I want to start by thanking the ISOC Bay Area chapter, Fatima and Susanna and all of the members. This is a readout that we have provided on a number of occasions, and they've been among the most vibrant and active supporters of this effort. We have these readout sessions for you, so you need not travel to attend an ICANN public meeting. So if ICANN's work, which touches on many of the aspects of internet issues that Fatima was just describing, is of interest to you in your daily life or in your day job or for the company you work for or the organization you're a member of, we're hoping that these webinars are a way for you to ask questions, to learn about the issues, and in a smaller, more intimate setting, get to follow the ICANN issues. Please give us feedback on how it's working, and please throughout this, using the chat, please ask questions, and we'll leave plenty of time at the end. We would like to know more about how to make these compelling and interesting and certainly understandable for people both already familiar with ICANN and newcomers. So let me start out with talking about ICANN's role and mission. ICANN is the coordinator of the Internet's addressing function, names and numbers. As the name implies, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, it has a technical function of making available addresses like domain names, which you may have purchased or registered yourself through a registrar, which is then in turn kept with the registry, which is then provided a master root directory by ICANN. Or you may work in a company that manufactures devices that requires numeric addresses, which we work through internet registries around the world to provide. So there's this very technical coordinating function of making the internet scalable by making the addressing system scalable. And though the founders and originators of the internet wanted everything to be distributed and independently operated, this was one part of the internet that needed central coordination. They couldn't find a way to decentralize it. So it's among the most important standards and protocols that allowed the independent networks of the internet to interconnect. In addition to this technical function, ICANN convenes a community. And so this webinar is to report on one of the public meetings of the ICANN community that took place last month in Barcelona. And this community makes policies for the innovation and evolution of these addressing systems. So the ICANN community is several thousands of people from nearly every country in the world. They are volunteers who work in what is a multi-stakeholder, bottom-up, and consensus-driven matter. By multi-stakeholder, we mean it covers every category from government to business to civil society to internet users to technical experts. By bottom-up, we mean that anyone with a good idea in any corner of the community can propose it for a policy development process, and if they achieve consensus, it goes forward as policy. So this community makes recommendations to the board of directors, which in turn ratifies it, and it becomes part of addressing policy under ICANN. Now, the ICANN organization, which Joe and I work for, is like the secretariat that supports all of these activities. We have offices around the world to support the global community, and we perform many support functions, operational functions, and policy development support. The way by which policy is developed involves a series of organizations called supporting organizations. Those are listed on the left side of the current slide. One is for the address supporting organization, which coordinates those numeric addresses that I referred to. The second is the country code top-level domain names. These are two-letter codes that you're familiar with that countries around the world have access to as a resource. .fr for France, for example, .br for Brazil, to name just two. The bulk of the policy output of ICANN comes from an organization called the Generic Names Supporting Organization. And generic top-level domains are those, again, which are after the dot, which are not country names. So the most famous being .com, but .org is another. There are many new generic top-level domains, as we'll see in a moment, that have been introduced into the addresses of the internet. So from these organizations, anyone, as I said, can develop an idea for policy. It's put into a report. There's public consultation. There is a draft delivered to the board and further consultation. And it's a pretty open, transparent, somewhat arduous process working remotely. These policy working groups develop policies which are advised at each stage by advisory committees, and these are listed at the bottom of the slide. There is one for the at-large community, which are ordinary internet users, one for security and stability experts that give advice on how policies affect the security, stability, and resilience of the addressing systems. There's a root server advisory committee, and finally, the Government Advisory Committee, on which over 170 governments sit, providing advice on the policies that ICANN is putting out at any given time. So at ICANN 63 in Barcelona, as I said, one of 3 public meetings that ICANN holds each year. It's what's called an annual general meeting in which all of the governance and annual governance processes took place, as opposed to other meetings which can be focused more specifically on things like policy or outreach. The topics we chose for today, we chose basically to be topics that we thought would be relatable by newcomers or of interest to people on the call, but many things happened at ICANN. And many topics were addressed. One fun topic was ICANN's 20th anniversary. ICANN really was incorporated as a nonprofit global organization in 1998. And so this meeting in Barcelona was an opportunity to celebrate that. And as part of the celebration, a series of blogs were published in partnership with Circle ID, the web platform for internet naming issues. And if you want to know about the history and a little bit about the cultural origins of ICANN, I encourage you to look at those blogs. ICANN 63 had nearly 2,500 people, about 2,360 checked in of the 2,500 who registered. Many more followed remotely. These meetings have simultaneous interpretation, and you can participate remotely if you have a connection, asking questions, making comments, and so forth. What was interesting about this meeting as well was that the government of Spain opted to host what they call a high-level governmental meeting, where ministerial level government officials representing the digital ministry or the internet information and communication and telecommunications ministries, a number of them attended. There were 124 delegations and a couple of dozen ministerial level representatives. And they really had a full day, as you could understand, getting what for them is very useful information about the technical workings of the internet, its addressing system, and really an examination of the interplay of their public policy role in their respective countries and the global nature of the internet's addressing system. As I said, for this webinar, we've chosen just a couple of topics we thought would be of interest, but many things are addressed in an ICANN meeting, ranging from cybercrime and things that happen in terms of abuse of the domain name system, privacy, domain and addressing technical evolution, and again, this broader picture of regulation and how it affects the global interoperability of the internet. So with that, I will pause and turn it over to my colleague Joe to address the first topic that we chose for you. And again, the chat is open for questions, and we should have time for discussion at the end. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chris. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. My name is Joe Catapano, and I am the manager for stakeholder engagement for the North America region at ICANN. And I am going to talk a little bit about what happened at ICANN 63 related to domain names. When we talk about domain names, we have the as Chris touched upon earlier, we have the 22 what they call legacy domain names, such as .com, .net, .org, etc. And then we have more than 1,200 new top-level domain names, examples of which include .photography, .guru, as well as branded domains such as .barclays is one example there. This slide shows a distribution of where the new generic top-level domains are coming from. So you can see the majority of them are coming from the North America region, and then many in the growing area of Asia Pacific as well. So there was a lot that happened at the meeting related to domain names. We'll touch on just a few of those. Some of the more hot topics that happened. One of them was the subsequent procedures policy development process working group. And part of this is when we talk about subsequent procedures, we're talking about the first round of the new generic top-level domain program ended a couple years ago, and they're in the process of, the ICANN community is in the process of reviewing the program, seeing what worked, what didn't work, what should be adjusted before thinking of any kind of second round of new domains that might come out in the future. So the subsequent procedures working group met for a full day at the meeting. There are 5 work tracks to this working group. The most interesting of the work tracks is work track 5, which is devoted to the issue of geographic names at the top level, and focused on reviewing existing geographic terms and their rules from the 2012 applicant guidebook. The ICANN community developed a guidebook with the rules, regulations, and procedures for the new generic top-level domain program in 2012 that guides the whole process. And so this work track considered whether the protections that are in there required modification, and whether there should be more protections in the future, and the nature of the protections were also discussed. And work track 5 is working on its initial report, which should be coming out here shortly. We're about a month after the conclusion of ICANN 63, so we hope to see that soon. Excuse me. The working group also discussed and came to agreement on its supplemental initial report for work tracks 1 through 4. This report reviews topics additional to those found in its initial report, which already went out for public comment. I don't know if we mentioned, but in the ICANN policymaking process, there are several times in the process that policies come out for public comment, and anybody can comment on the policy. All of the policies are posted on the ICANN website in a very transparent manner so people can have their input. And the working group kicked off a set of 3 subgroups that'll be responsible for considering the public comments to the initial report. And we have a link to the relevant recording and transcript, which should say that all of the, almost all of the sessions at ICANN 63 have recordings and transcripts available, so you can go back and actually see and read what transpired. The link of which for subsequent procedures is at the bottom of this slide, and we'll distribute these slides afterwards. Another domain name working group that had a lot of work done was the Rights Protection Mechanisms Working Group. This looks at, the title entails, protections for applicants for new top-level domains. They met for 4 sessions during the course of the meeting and reviewed proposals to some of the protection mechanisms, which include the Uniform Rapid Suspension mechanism, and there are a couple of others, the Uniform Dispute Resolution Policy and the what we call the Trademark Clearinghouse. With regards to the URS, it was decided that all proposals would be put into the working group's initial report. There was some talk about, how much support the community had for that. Discussions are ongoing. They had an analysis group that presented results of its surveys for the Trademark Clearinghouse and trademark claims. Questions were raised in the working group regarding the validity of the surveys and the level of confidence in the results. So there's some discussion going on there. But the results of the surveys will form the basis of the next phase of the group's work. And again, the recordings and transcripts we have of the relevant sessions available at the bottom of the slide. As I mentioned, a lot happened in the domain name space at the meeting. Here is kind of the honorable mentions slide. So on the internationalized domain name front, IDNs are domain names that are in non-Latin scripts. You can see they organized a session to present on recommendations for managing variant top-level domains. The Universal Acceptance Steering Group held a workshop. Universal Acceptance is the system by which the idea or construct in which systems must treat all domain names in a consistent manner and accept, validate, store, and process and display all domain names consistently. And they identified areas for research and update on training by what we refer to as Universal Acceptance Ambassadors. There were several meetings and discussions related to the Registration Data Access Protocol, or RDAP. RDAP is a successor to the WHOIS system, which is a system of looking up relevant registration data related to a domain name. So for each domain name, there is a owners provide information, name, and other contact information, email, phone number, etc. Discussions continued on the Privacy and Proxy Service Provider Accreditation Program. As I talked about the WHOIS system, some use a privacy and proxy server to anonymize their registration, so it's not visible to the entire public. There was an advisory panel for domain name marketplace indicators, and they met and review and discuss a final set of metrics. And there was a session on innovation in top-level domains, showing what things organizations and individuals are doing with the domains that they have set up and run. included a showing of .brand TLDs in action. So those are like I mentioned, like .barclays, brands of companies that have new top-level domains. So that is just a high-level snapshot of what happened in the domain name space. There was a lot that transpired, but this is the best highlights we have for you there. And now I believe I will turn it back over to Chris for the auction proceeds.
Thank you very much, Joe. This topic is also related to domain names, and I'll explain now what do we mean by auction proceeds. So as Joe mentioned a couple of years ago, the opportunity to apply for and operate top-level domain names became a reality. And as you can imagine, multiple parties, in many cases, would apply for the same name. So what are the most popular names you can think of? Well, multiple people applied, for example, to operate .hotel or .car or .shop. And in fact, there were 218 instances of multiple applications to operate the same name. But because of the interoperability and uniqueness of addressing for the internet, there can be only one of each of these names, and somebody needs to operate it. Now, in most of those 218 cases, there were various private ways to resolve the conflict. People bought each other out, people flipped a coin, people negotiated, people teamed up with allies. But there have been to date 16 cases where what was employed to determine who would operate the domain name was something called a last resort auction. And so this was an auction that was convened by ICANN as a last resort mechanism, and it has generated quite a bit of money, $233 million US, largely from the biggest garnering domain name auctions. They were for .shop, as I mentioned, .web was another, .app was another, each of these in the tens of millions of dollars for the final winning bidder. So the community foresaw this when expanding the domain names and writing in their application guidebook. They said that the funds for any last resort auctions would be held in abeyance, in escrow, if you will, and held until the community could decide what they would do with them. That would be both within ICANN's mission and furtherance of the interoperability of the internet and the internet community, and would need to be approved by the board. There has also been a decision by the ICANN board to take 36 million of these 233 million to make them available to replenish ICANN's reserves. ICANN, in its bylaws, is required to keep reserves of 100% of its operating annual budget. So the cross-community working group is a community-wide working group that's really trying to put together a vision of the mechanism by which these funds could be used for the benefit of the internet and the domain name system. And they have just, I believe they've just extended a public comment period. So it's an interesting time for those of you who find this an interesting topic to read the report and answer the questions that are posed in the comments, public comments page. If you search for public comments homepage on ICANN or just public comments ICANN, you'll find this listed among the opportunities to provide your input. Now, it's at a very early stage, so the recommendations are at a very high level, as such things as how to distribute funds transparently, how to have accountability, how to mitigate conflicts of interests and be transparent, whether and how to distribute money in tranches, in large grants, in small grants, whether to partner with an existing foundation whether to create a new foundation, create a separate structure under the ICANN org, the governance for such a structure, and so on and so forth. So there's a great level of detail that's going into really just arriving at the right mechanism. And as a next step, what the cross-community working group will take that public comment submissions. The board of directors of ICANN wrote a letter which gave some input as well, and they will assimilate that into the next version of a report. So if you are interested, please click on the link to virtually attend the session that took place in Barcelona, and that will give you a sense and a flavor of how the work on this topic is proceeding. I'll stop there. I believe the next topic is an at-large update, which I'll turn to our friends in the ISOC chapter to deliver.
Thanks, Chris. I just want to give a quick overview of what at-large is, excuse me, for those of you who are new to ICANN. One of the biggest complaints for newcomers to ICANN, and indeed for those of us who've been involved with the community for a while, is the overwhelming use of acronyms. And nowhere is this more so than in the at-large community. So please accept my apologies in advance as I'm about to throw a ton of acronyms at you. So the at-large advisory committee is known as ALAC, or simply at-large, and it's one of ICANN's 4 advisory committees. And these advisory committees are called for in the ICANN bylaws, and their main function is to report findings and offer recommendations to the ICANN board. So at-large is responsible for representing the interests of the internet's end users within the ICANN community. And to ensure maximum representation for those end users, the ALAC is made up of 5 regional groups called Regional At-Large Organizations, which are known as RALOs. And each of these RALOs is made up of at-large structures, which are known as ALSs, and individual members from that particular region. So the San Francisco Bay Area Internet Society chapter is an at-large structure, an ALS, and participates in the North American Regional At-Large Organization, which is otherwise known as NORALO. And this includes organizations and individuals in the US, Canada, and Puerto Rico. So if your focus is on internet end users rather than domain names, for example, or IP addresses, and you'd like to get more involved with ICANN, participating in at-large through an at-large structure, an ALS, like the San Francisco Bay Area Internet Society chapter, would be a good place for you to start. Right, so now you all know what at-large is. I'll just give a really brief update of what was going on in this area during the ICANN 63 meeting. So Alan Greenberg, who was the chair of ALAC, stepped down and was replaced by another longtime at-large participant, Maureen Hilliard. She's now focusing on making the ALAC's work more understandable and transparent. Every 3 years, the ALAC holds a summit known as Atlas, and this is where the at-large community gathers to work face-to-face on global end-user issues. And the next one, I believe, is in Montreal at the end of 2019, and plans for this were discussed during the ICANN 63 meeting. Another thing that was discussed at ICANN 63 was the follow-up to the joint ALAC and Governmental Advisory Committee, which is known as the GAC, statement on enabling inclusive, informed, and meaningful participation at ICANN, and this follow-up statement was approved. It's a follow-up to the original statement, and this original statement advised ICANN to develop, among other things, to develop a simple document management system and to provide executive summaries on key issues to help people get the information they need to be able to participate in ICANN effectively. The Outreach and Engagement Committee reported their results from their outreach work and will continue their efforts to get more people involved in the at-large community. And finally, the at-large Coordinated Policy Working Group discussed the current ICANN public comment initiatives that are ongoing in the community. So if anybody would like any further links, any links to further information on any of these items that I just noted, or would like any more information about how to get involved with @large, just please let me know. And now I think back to Chris.
Thanks,
Talk to us about GDPR, everybody's favorite subject.
Yes, so I'm going to try to bring it home with a very high-level treatment of a very complex topic, which I must say has been the headline topic for the last 2 ICANN meetings. So many of you may be aware that the European Union implemented a law called the General Data Protection Regulation in May of this year. And it was really designed to give European citizens and permanent residents of the EU more control and transparency and confidence over how data about them might be handled. It gives very clear definitions of who are the data subjects, as the citizens and permanent residents are known, the controllers and processors of data. And though in development for quite a while, it really got a lot of attention because it imposes some significant penalties for non-compliance. Now, in the ICANN context, you might recall that Joe and others have mentioned the system which formerly or up to now has been known as Whois, which is a way for any of us to research information about who has registered a domain name. And this system in the early days was really a purely technical exercise where if you or I controlled a relevant domain name or hosted a relevant server, we would give that technical information along with our contact information so that we could be communicated with in the event that there was a technical issue or a breakdown. And so all of this information continues to be collected at the time that you or I make a registration for a domain name, and the registrars and the registries with whom they register your domain names have obligations under contracts with ICANN to maintain the data about us as registrants and make it available to this distributed service, which is a way of looking up who's behind a domain name. So you can see how there would be a conflict between what the European law requires in terms of not sharing data to third parties and others versus the requirements under the Whois program and the ICANN contracts with the registrars and registries that make Whois work. So at ICANN 63, the community discussed the most recent issues and actually finalized a report which has just come out. And so it's very timely today. In fact, today was the day that the public comments on an interim report opened up. Before I get to where we are today, let me back up. As I said, this really started at ICANN 62. The ICANN community had to, the generic name supporting organization launched something called an expedited policy development process. And why did they do that? Well, they did that because the ICANN board of directors had been obliged to do something called a temporary specification in the contracts that it has with registries and registrars, in order so that these registries and registrars would not be falling afoul of the European law, and yet the specification asked them to continue to collect data on those who are registering domain names without making it publicly available. So that's, again, a very high-level description of what the board decided to implement as a temporary measure to adjust these contracts to help registrars and registries remain compliant with the European law. Now, you'll remember at the beginning we said that ICANN policy comes from bottom-up, community-driven processes. So for the board to do something in a very top-down way, by fiat, if you will, according to the bylaws, means that it can only be temporary and requires that the community come up with a way to ratify and approve that. And so there is, in fact, a very representative policy development process going on with each of the segments of the ICANN community representative, and they have worked very hard to develop a charter, develop questions. The biggest question is really, is the temporary specification appropriate? Could it be an official ICANN policy, or does it need to be changed or adjusted? And as you can imagine, it's very complex, because at the same time that this is going on, various parties are in communication with European data privacy regulators to try to get feedback on what might bring the WHOIS system into compliance with the GDPR. And there's also a debate about who is responsible once there's any decision made on the accessibility of the data, who would be responsible as sort of being the keeper or the gatekeeper or providing the access, because that's quite a big responsibility and exposes that party to all kinds of liability and responsibility under the European law. And it's not just Europe. In Brazil, in India, in China, in a number of countries, there's emerging legislation that's very similar. So this long-standing debate over the accessibility of domain name registrant data and compliance with privacy regulation around the world is really coming to a head right now. So at ICANN 63, the expedited PDP team met 4 times. They came up with responses and additional questions. They listed a series of recommendations, even those for which they have not reached consensus yet. And they have really structured the public comments this time around in a way that asks you very specific questions about your opinion and asks you to cite rationale but behind your opinion. But these questions range from the purposes of, why and what data should be made available. What's the legal basis for making data available? What data elements could be minimized or omitted or reduced? And what the legal basis for sharing with a third party might be. The European law does give some opportunities to share data, but under very limited circumstances. The team created workbooks and again are really mapping each data point with these particular questions. I think that just to highlight on the next slide, the debate between natural persons versus legal persons, which are organizations or companies or others, is one that's garnering a lot of attention. The geographic application, because there's a de facto extraterritoriality effect of the GDPR, and as I mentioned, the definitions of access. So the public comment, as I mentioned, we're in a very intensive time. It's a 30-day public comment period that kicked off today. It will not be extended. There is a recording of the webinar that took place today, which I will place in the chat. Really, by February, the expedited policy development process working group needs to have recommendations for an additional public comment period by February, so that the board can consider it in April. And on the last slide in this section, there are again links to the sessions and recorded transcripts of the sessions that took place in ICANN 63. Sorry for that was a little lengthier than I thought I would need to be, but it's, as I said, it's very complex, and I'd be delighted to take questions in the question period on this topic. But I'll turn it over for a report on ICANN's fellowship and next gen programs.
Yes, so because the ICANN community is quite complex, especially for newcomers, there are several initiatives in place that help people get up to speed. with the workings of ICANN. The Next Gen program is specifically targeted at students and young people between the ages of 18 and 30. And they have to be residing in the region in which a particular ICANN meeting is taking place. But the fellowship program is a little bit more open. It's one of these initiatives that help people get up to speed with the community. And it's open to anyone over the age of 21 and offers an excellent opportunity to get immersed in the ICANN community with the help of training, mentoring, direct participation. There's also no upper age limit, so that, there's no restrictions, and you can participate in the program up to 3 times. The next slide, please. Thanks. So each year between 40 and 50 fellows are selected for the program, and up until 2016, those of us based here in the North America region were actually unable to participate, as the fellowship focused solely on those from underserved regions, or underserved regions participating in the ICANN community. But now it's open to everyone, regardless of location. So that's good news for us. So the program explains the role of each supporting organization, known as SOs, and advisory councils, advisory committees. Advisory committees? I think the slide is wrong. And how to contribute to policy development. And also how to find the right community to join, because you're kind of overwhelmed with an enormous amount of information, and you don't quite know which part of it you want to start participating in. The next application round is open for ICANN 65, which is taking place in Marrakesh in June 2019. However, because the second ICANN meeting of each year focuses mostly on policy, the fellowships for these meetings are only available to those who have already completed a previous fellowship, because you need a little bit of preparation to be able to participate in those policy meetings. So if you're a first timer, you'll need to wait until the applications open for the ICANN 66 meeting, which takes place in Montreal in Canada in November 2019. ICANN covers the fellows' flights, accommodation, and also provides a daily stipend. So I was a fellow at the ICANN 60 meeting in Abu Dhabi, and I cannot recommend the program enough to anyone who wants to get involved but doesn't quite know where to start. The fellowship mantra is, when you're a fellow, there are no stupid questions. And being on the program kind of gives you sort of, it gives you multiple kind of ask me anything sessions with ICANN staff, including the ICANN CEO, Joran Marby, who, by the way, is hugely supportive of this initiative, as well as other ICANN community leaders. And you can literally ask them anything about participating in the ICANN community, so you can really find the place that you want to be within the community. So if you need more information on this, again, feel free to ask me. If you want to know how the fellowship works, as I said, I have participated, so I'm happy to share my experiences. There's also some links on the screen. And yeah, if you have any questions, just let me know. And then I think I'll hand over now to Joe. I unmute his microphone. There you go, Joe.
Thank you, Susanna. So the next, I'll be really brief so we can get to the Q&A, as I know we're coming to the top of the hour. The next meeting is ICANN 64, which will be in Kobe, Japan. There's a funny little picture of Kobe below it. The meeting will be from March 9th to the 14th. This is the community forum at ICANN. So it's a little bit of a shorter meeting than the annual general meeting, but a little bit longer than the policy forum that Susanna was talking about. You do not need to be at the meeting to participate. All of the, well, most of the sessions have a Adobe Connect room where you can type in the chat and have your voice heard. You can see all the things that transpire there. All the documents from the meeting are publicly available. We've put links in these slides, so you can see that all the recordings and transcripts are publicly available on the website. You can go to the Kobe meeting page there for more details on that. And of course, if you can't get to the meeting in person, we have these readouts after every meeting. And I'm sure we'll have one again after ICANN 64 for this community here. And then there's also a link to for our mailing list and newsletters, so you can catch up on that. And with that, I think we are at Q&A.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions about anything that they've heard, now's the time to ask.
Hi, Joe and Chris. This is Fatima. Thank you so much for sharing that. I guess it's obvious, but my question is going to be about GDPR. So you mentioned that there's a temporary specification as an interim measure to bring the existing WHOIS regulations in line with the GDPR. But with other countries passing similar laws in the future about privacy, can you share a little more about the challenges that ICANN will face to get to a consistent policy that's going to be compliant with so many individual laws? And what do you foresee as the biggest roadblocks?
Hi, thanks. It's Chris, and I really appreciate the question. The working group has been very, very conscious of the emerging regulations around the world, but they do at least have a similar thrust, which is to minimize the amount of personal data or data about individuals that can be shared, and to come up with rationales and legal justifications under those laws when they can be. So, but if you think of the many, many dozens of use cases, and these were all recorded as an initial step by the team working on this, it could be anything from people investigating crimes that are committed using internet domain name tools, or cybersecurity, the propagation of malware, but also crimes related to intellectual property, piracy, and others. In addition to what has always been access that was required by people just needing a technical contact to let somebody know when their site might be down or there's a technical glitch. So it's rationalizing all these with the emerging regulations. It's a huge undertaking, and I think that the EPDP is really working with an eye toward not just addressing immediately the GDPR, but coming up with a WHOIS system that is defensible for these other regulations that are emerging as well. The roadblock is simply the wide variety. There isn't really a roadblock, it's just very hard going to reaching consensus. I have to say, if you had asked this working group 3 months ago, 4 months ago, if they could get anything done or even issue an initial report, I think they wouldn't have believed that they could. I think that having a deadline, having a commitment, and having really come up with a new structure for making policy under a tight deadline, but they're feeling much more confident now. And the report that came out today is evidence of that. I haven't found the link to the webinar yet, but I will send the link to the public comment period, and I will certainly ask for Susanna and Fatima to share the webinar link afterward. But you can really get a sense of where the recommendations are heading. It's just a really key illustration of how national or regional laws have unintended consequences when it comes to global internet interoperability.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we will be sharing the webinar link, but I'll definitely be deep diving into this a little more because it's personally of interest, and I'd definitely like to know more.
Great. And I do want to say, if people have questions about other topics that we didn't mention on the webinar, we've chosen what we thought were interesting topics, but if you have other issues or just general questions about ICANN, we have a couple more minutes to answer those.
I think, Jolie, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Oh, I'll take my headphones off. I have an echo. Yeah, I wanted to ask about something that wasn't mentioned, which is the community evaluation process for new GTLDs. It was a little controversial because stuff like .gay got turned down. I thought I heard there was some kind of process going on. Can you comment on
that? This is Chris. What Jolie is referring to is the process in the new generic top-level domain expansion program, whereby it was recognized that not just deep-pocketed applicants should have access to these resources, but maybe communities of interest should also have access as well. And so there was a point system that gave recognized communities a little bit of a head start in terms of being evaluated as to who should operate a domain name. There's been quite an ongoing debate around a few of them, one of them being .gay, which has been appealed through ICANN processes several times based on an applicant that sought community, a designation as a community. I don't have the answer, Jolie, on what the latest on that is. I think that there were just a couple of these community designations that were being appealed, and I don't know what's bubbled up to be considered by the board, but I will get that information, and perhaps we make that a topic for a future webinar.
Yeah, I was more interested if there was some review of the actual way that the process worked.
Yes. Okay. So potentially what you're referring to was what Joe was reviewing, which is there's a working group on subsequent procedures. And what does subsequent procedures mean? It means if the domain name space is expanded again, will the rules need to be changed? And the working group has already identified community designation as an area in one of its work tracks for discussion. And so to avoid the kind of contentious and appeals that happened under the last expansion, I think they may revisit how communities are defined, who is the definer and validator of those definitions and so forth.
Thank you.
Okay, any more questions?
I believe Amolik's hand is up as well. Amolik, do you have a question?
Go ahead, Amolik.
I don't see Amolik having a mic.
If you're talking, we can't hear you.
No worries.
You can type your question into the chat if that's helpful. Yep, okay. So he's typing his question.
Okay, so I believe the question is, earlier in the slides, I saw that GDPR applies to EU citizens and residents. I'm curious as to how does it apply to citizens of other countries who VPN into the servers that are located in the EU region? This question is from Amolik.
Hi, this is Chris. I don't have the answer to that. I know the working group has been advised by lawyers who are expert in the GDPR, and maybe some on the group have an answer if they've been working in the group, if that's come up. I know one of the challenges is that certainly European Union citizens are all over the world in all kinds of territories, and you raise a very good question about using VPN connections to virtually be in one territory or another, but I'm not familiar enough with the law myself to be able to answer, but there may be others who can.
So not sure anybody on this call is qualified to really answer that in depth, but we can point you in the direction of where you might be able to find some more information about that, Emily. Okay, so we're at 1:05 now, as we started 5 minutes early, 5 minutes late, sorry. We're now on top of the hour. So unless there are any more questions. Sebastian?
Yes, Sebastian, thank you very much.
Sorry, I just
Sebastian
saw your
Bachelot speaking, not answering the question, but I would like to suggest, if you have time to spend, listen to the link I gave it to you, not the one about the EPDP presentation today, because it's, frankly speaking, the one of today was really going through a process, and the one given by Alan Greenberg yesterday to at-large working group was much more about content and discussion about the content. Therefore, if you are interested in the content, what it's done at the EPDP, it's better to listen this recording, not the other. But if you have time to listen both, that's you can do both. But if you have no enough time, second point, and I'm sorry, but I need to come back to one thing that you say, the at-large summit. It's was held in each 5 years. The first one was in Mexico in 2009, the second one in London in 2014, and we are trying to organize one, hopefully, in 2019 in Montreal at the end of the year. And of course, participation will be welcome, both present in Montreal or online. I would like also to thank you for organizing it. I think it's very, very useful for people. I hope that next time you will have more participants and more people who are not, who have less knowledge about what ICANN is doing, because I saw that a lot of people are with a good level of knowledge. But and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Sebastian. Yes, so I mentioned that the Atlas, which is the at-large summit, occurs every 3 years, but that was incorrect. It's actually every 5 years. So thank you for pointing that out. I think unless we have any more questions, we need to stop here. Thanks again for all taking the time out to join us this afternoon, and especially to Chris and Joe for providing this excellent roundup of what happened at ICANN 63. As Fatima has already noted, we'll definitely be publishing the recording of this session on our website. I hope it's all been really useful to you. I know quite a few of the participants today are ICANN regulars, but we do have a couple of people who are absolute newcomers on the call today, so I hope that the information has been useful to them. And I look forward to seeing you in a few months' time for the ICANN 64 readout. Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thank you, Susanna, and thank you, Chris and Joe.
Thanks all.
Thank you.